If you don't show your cool podcast mic in your videos, are you even really a YouTuber? In this video, I'm going to show you how to connect an XLR microphone like this condenser mic or this dynamic microphone straight into your camera without running your microphone through a bulky and oftentimes expensive audio interface or sound recorder. And it's all made possible with this awesome little $50 device. So for those who are newbies to audio and microphones, I'm going to briefly go over the difference between condenser and dynamic mics and what you need to make them sound good. But if you already know that, skip to the chapter where I start going over the different setups. In general, a well-treated space for sound is going to do wonders for your audio, but it's even more important when you're using a condenser mic because they're much more sensitive and they pick up much of the ambient noise in a space. This means that you're going to get the desired audio level without relying on bumping up the gain on your camera's preamps. Preamps in DSLRs and mirrorless cameras are typically not great, and turning them too high is going to introduce a lot of hiss, noise, and distortion. Condenser mics are thought of to give a more natural and authentic sound compared to dynamic mics because they do pick up the whole room, but it requires a quiet room and at least a semi-treated one with some carpet and some bulky furniture to absorb the sound. Dynamic mics, on the other hand, reject most of the ambient noise in the space and pick up really what's only right in front of them. So you don't need to worry nearly as much if the room that you're in is great for audio recording. Most of the podcasts you listen to are likely using dynamic mics because they more naturally provide that radio or podcasty sound. But the problem, especially when using a dynamic mic straight into your camera, is that dynamic mics need much more audio gain than condenser mics do in order to get that desired audio level. And when I get to the dynamic mic setup, you'll see why this can cause some problems. So let's start with the condenser mic setup. And you might ask yourself, why not just take an XLR to 3.5mm cable and plug it straight into your camera? But this isn't going to work because condenser mics need what's called phantom power. Audio interfaces, mixers, and audio recorders do provide phantom power, but almost all cameras don't. And that's where the Xvive P1 comes in. It's rechargeable, portable, phantom power in a tiny box. It has an on and off switch, a toggle between 12 volt and 48 volts of output, and LED lights to indicate how much juice you have left. It's a super simple design and really easy to use. In addition to the P1, you'll need one female to male XLR cable and a female XLR to 3.5mm cable. Plug one end of the XLR cable into your mic and the other into the input of the P1. Then plug the XLR to 3.5mm cord to the output of the P1 and then into the camera's audio port. And voila! Now you're listening to this cheap $30 condenser microphone plugged straight into the A7S III. It's not the best sounding, but it still sounds pretty decent. Now, this setup is not going to get you the best audio quality that you can get out of your microphone because we're still relying on our camera's preamps, which I mentioned earlier are not the best. But fortunately, we aren't having to crack up the gain on our camera too high to get the desired audio level. We currently have our audio level on our camera at 7. When you're testing audio levels, you want to aim for it to be between -12 and -6 dBs so that you're not at risk of audio clipping and that in post you're not having to boost the audio too much. Using an audio interface or mixer will get you better audio quality, but for $50 and being plug and play, this is a very cost-effective and simple way to get audio from your microphone straight into your camera. And now we're going to move on to the dynamic mic setup. And unlike condenser mics, dynamic mics do not need phantom power. And so technically, we can get audio by plugging our dynamic mic straight into the camera with an XLR to 3.5mm cord. So let's test it out. So now this is a mic test of the Shure SM48 plugged straight into our Sony A7S III with an XLR to 3.5mm cord. So to get our desired audio level, which again is between -12 and -6 dBs, we had to turn our camera's gain all the way up to 20. And like I said, this is going to introduce hiss, distortion, and noise. To get a cleaner sound, you're going to need to add more audio gain apart from what your camera provides. And this is where inline preamps like the Cloudlifter comes in. This awesome little box is going to add 20 to 25 dBs of clean gain to our setup. But this device needs phantom power, and that's where the P1 comes in. So here's what you need to set this up. An XLR cable, a male to female XLR adapter, and an XLR to 3.5mm cord. Take your XLR cord and plug it from the microphone and into the Cloudlifter. Now take your XLR adapter and connect the Cloudlifter into the input of the P1. Turn on the P1, and lastly, connect the P1 to your camera with the XLR to 3.5mm. So now here's an audio test of the Shure SM48 dynamic mic with the Cloudlifter and P1 straight into the camera. We're getting so much more audio output that I had to turn the camera's gain all the way down to 5. And this is great because the less you need to rely on your camera's preamps and the lower you can turn the audio gain down, the cleaner and better the audio should be. And now just for comparison, I'll play the audio both with and without the Cloudlifter back to back. So now this is a mic test of the Shure SM48 plugged straight into our Sony a7S III with an XLR to 3.5mm cord. So now here's an audio test of the Shure SM48 dynamic mic with the Cloudlifter and P1 straight into the camera. You should be able to hear a lot more noise and distortion in the first example, and the second example should sound a lot cleaner. But you guys let me know in the comments what you think. If you have a condenser microphone, I think this is a great option because it is affordable and really easy to use, and you're gonna get good audio quality. And if you have a dynamic microphone, I still think it's a good option, but it's not an obvious one. The P1 and Cloudlifter is gonna run you around $200, which is then more expensive than some budget audio interface options like the Behringer UMCs. I don't know the difference in audio quality between these two options, but if you want me to make a comparison video, let me know in the comments. Like I said, when you start using audio interfaces and mixers, you're now dealing with having to run power to them, another device to worry about, and adding more bulk to your setup. With the P1 and Cloudlifter setup, all you need is an extra XLR adapter, and now you can use this setup anywhere without relying on any wall power. And to save some money, you can opt for the Fethead inline preamp over the Cloudlifter, which is around $90 at the time of shooting. But if you don't consider yourself a real YouTuber and you don't want to use these podcast type mics in your videos, check out this video on the Rode Wireless Go 2s for a super simple and good audio solution. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.